The fifth canto of the Srimad Bhagavatam, one of the most exalted books in the portion of the Vedas that deal with spiritual knowledge, offers a bewildering explanation about the structure of the universe. According to this explanation, the earth is part of Jambudvipa, a gigantic flat structure that divides the universe in half. In the lower part, there are subterranean worlds, inhabited by the asuras, demoniac beings, while the upper part is filled by numerous stars and planets organized in disks. Not only that, but our South Ocean is just the first one in a series of concentric oceans intercalated with concentric islands. For one with a little bit of scientific background, this explanation can appear purely imaginative, but if we go beyond the surface, it's actually very complex, deep, and intriguing. First of all, the Vedas also give a view of the universe that is very similar to modern science. In the 𝗨𝘶𝗶𝗃𝗲𝗏, the structure of the solar system is described with remarkable similarity to the modern astronomy, with the size, orbits, and distance to the planets being described with pinpoint accuracy. According to the 𝗨𝘶𝗶𝗃𝗏, the diameter of the Earth is 8,000 miles, while modern estimate is 7,928 miles. The distance to Mars is 1.54 AU, astronomical units, while the modern estimative is 1.52 AU, and so on. The 𝗨𝘶𝗶𝗃𝗏 even hints on the orbit of Uranus, which was discovered only in 1781. It happens that the 𝗨𝘶𝗶𝗃𝗏 explains the universe according to our human sense perception. Since science is also based in sense perception, it's no wonder that the numbers are very similar. However, the portions of the Vedas that deal with spiritual subjects, like the Srimad Bhagavatam and other Puranas, explain the universe according to the sense perception of the Devas, more evolved beings that live in the upper planetary systems. In other words, it doesn't describe the universe we experience with our senses, but the way they experience the universe. It may sound strange that different beings could have such different conceptions of reality, but this is actually something that we can observe even in our own planet. Carnivorous animals, like tigers, see in black and white, while we see in colors. Butterflies can see ultraviolet light that is invisible to us, while certain animals can't see at all, being guided only by smell. Our concept of reality is based on electrical signals our brain receives from their eyes, nose, ears, etc. If one would receive a different set of senses, he would perceive reality in a different way. In other words, we can only understand the world to the extent our senses allow it. The same way a person that is completely blind will never be able to understand what color is, the limitations of our senses prevent us from seeing and understanding many things that are experienced by higher beings. Apart from physical differences, there is also a difference in consciousness. The concept of reality of an ant is rudimentary if compared to a human being, for example. Similarly, our concept of reality is very limited if compared to the view of more evolved beings. Another way we can understand this is that in the same room we can have different frequencies of radio signals, like AM, FM, TV, 4G, 3G, etc., each one carrying a particular set of information. Although all the signals are simultaneously available, the one you can tune in depends on the device you are using. One that is using an old radio will be able to capture only sound, while others with a television will be able to also see images. One with a phone, on the other hand, will have access to the internet, which includes much more content, including the radio and TV programs. Similarly, our universe is composed of different dimensions, and we can synchronize in each one according to the particular set of senses we got, which is in turn determined by our previous consciousness. According to the Vedas, our concept of reality is determined according to our consciousness. Because of our consciousness, we assume a particular type of body in a certain planet and have access to a certain level of reality. In our case, we live in a gross dimension, where the universe appears cold and almost vacant, with the stars and planets very distant from each other and practically inaccessible for us. We are essentially imprisoned in our little planet by the law of gravity. Even if we send some probes or astronauts at an exorbitant cost to investigate what is beyond, they can't find anything very interesting outside. In our dimension, planets and stars that are part of different planetary systems are distributed in a more or less homogeneous way across the cosmos, but for higher beings, planets of similar level or syntony are closer to each other, and the inhabitants can go from one to the other through interplanetary pathways. It's described, for example, that certain passages in the Himalayas connect our planet to the celestial planets, but only persons with a certain level of consciousness can access such passages. In the Mahabharata is described how Pandavas ascended to the place of Kuvera, the king of the Yakshas, through one of these pathways. For one that is able to cross these pathways, the other parts of Jambudvipa are just a walk away, and therefore the Srimad Bhagavatam describes these different interconnected fragments as a continuous area, which is exactly the perception of one that is traveling through them, although in your sense perception, these different parts of the structure are spread through different planets. For one that doesn't have the proper qualification, however, the pathways are invisible, and he will be stuck on this planet. As a result, when he crosses the Himalayas, he goes to China instead of the celestial planets. The existence of connected objects that are far apart, as well as shortcuts that allow one to access places that are far away, may seem fantasious, but these ideas are also discussed in modern physics, with the phenomenon of quantum entanglement and the theory of the wormholes, for example. Similarly, the moon is described in the Vedas as a celestial planet where pious souls can live in great delight for 10,000 years. In our gross dimension, however, the moon appears as just a lifeless piece of rock. This leads us to the concept of vertical dimension explained in the Vedas. Suppose you want to visit an office in the 98th floor of a prestigious building in Manhattan. You take a taxi and you go to the ground floor of the building. You went to the right place on the horizontal dimension, but to reach the office, you need to also travel in the vertical dimension, taking a lift or the stairs, going up until you reach the 98th floor. If somehow your credentials don't allow you to go up, then you will be stuck in the lobby. Similarly, even if one is able to go to the moon, without the proper consciousness, he will not be able to travel in the vertical dimension, and will therefore be stuck in the representation of the moon in our gross dimension, which is not so interesting. If one wants to access the celestial moon, he will need to travel by elevating his consciousness and transferring oneself there at the time of death. In this way, he will be able to accept a celestial body with a proper set of senses to interact with the inhabitants there. The great contribution of the view of the universe given in the Puranas is that it gives a mystical and theistic view of the universe, a universe that is teeming with life. By meditating in these descriptions, one can gradually elevate his consciousness and attain the same level of awareness as higher beings. This is the view of the universe that is going to be presented in the Temple of Vedic Planetarium, the 𝗨𝗨, when it's inaugurated in 2022. Conversely, the materialistic view of the universe offered by modern science, based solely on the observation using our gross senses, offers one a dead universe that leads only to the stagnation of one's consciousness. The great challenge when we study the model of the universe given in the Srimad Bhagavatam is to reconcile what we can observe with our gross sense perception and the ideas of multi-dimensions, different sets of senses and degrees of consciousness, and the idea of a vertical dimension. Without understanding this concept, one may end up with some simplistic or limited understanding.